Saturn is the sixth planet from the Sun in the solar system. Saturn was named after the Roman god Saturn, called Kronos in Greek mythology. The symbol of Saturn is the symbol of the sickle of Saturn. The outer part of Saturn's atmosphere is about 96% hydrogen. Of course, Saturn, like all the other planets, is not really a planet in the sense that modern science teaches us. But the characteristics attributed to it symbolically represent something much deeper and unknown to the general public. Much of the symbolism used today dates back to the worship of Saturn through Freemasonry and astrotheology, which in turn led to the Abrahamic religions of Islam, Judaism, and Judeo-Christianity. Saturn's black cube is derived from the shape of the hexagonal storm that rages continuously over Saturn's north pole. Theorists argue that virtually everything shaped like a cube in mainstream society is a covert devotion to Saturn: the black cube in Mecca, the Jewish Tefillin, the cross of Jesus, which is an unfolded cube, various images from pop culture and advertising. Some believe that Saturn is satanic, extraterrestrial, or reptilian, and represents the Illuminati and the New World Order machinations at play around us. But what does Saturn and its cube really represent? All we know about this universe is that it runs on electricity and magnetism. All living creatures are bioelectrical life forms. Everything in this construct has a polarity, or what we call the law of opposites. In order to have a concept of an idea, we must have the same concept of understanding its opposite. The human brain is no different in this aspect, as it is divided into two hemispheres and connected by a bridge called the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is a pad of thick neural network. The problem is that many of us only use one side of our brain, or the other, and this causes the split in our thinking and the way we perceive this reality. Each symmetry imposes the conservation of a parameter over time. For translational symmetry, this quantity is the momentum. For rotational symmetry, this quantity is the angular momentum. For time symmetry, this quantity is energy. For the symmetry of the intellect, this quantity is rationality. What seems most rational is that all aspects of this reality in which we live refer to ourselves, that's to say, to our body itself. Therefore, the principle that defines that all that is above is all that is below takes on its full meaning. We are therefore in a fractal world or symmetry of scales that the scientist Fibonacci discovered with his mathematical sequence. Saturn comes from the Latin satis, which means full or satiated, and which gives the word satisfaction. But what gives satisfaction in our body are certain hormones which, by excess, lead to addiction. Therefore, we can understand here the meaning of the name Satan, of the same origin, which is none other than addiction by vice, the satisfaction of our primary instincts via our hormones. There are satisfactions necessary for the proper functioning of our body and our behavior. The principle is balance. Addiction deviates us from this fundamental balance, what the established system impregnates us with in order to control. A mind weakened by the imbalance of vice is more easily controllable. It is the principle of the carrot to move the donkey. We are then no longer in the constancy of rationality, but in the inconstancy of our spontaneous emotions and our primary instincts. The area of the brain known as the reward circuit or pleasure pathways is located in the limbic regions of the brain. Although different substances may affect these pathways somewhat differently, they all lead to the release of dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with the experience of reward or pleasure. One of the reward pathway hormones leading to the release of dopamine is leptin, a peptide digestive hormone that regulates body fat stores and appetite by controlling feelings of fullness. The word satiety also derives from the Latin satis. Leptin receptors are expressed throughout the brain, with high levels in the hippocampus. Leptin has the ability to modulate higher brain functions, including its ability to markedly influence hippocampal synaptic function, and in particular learning and memory processes. Dysfunctions of the leptin system are associated with an increased incidence of Alzheimer's disease. To understand the links between events, the fractal world and ourselves, we must return to the principles of the very structure of our world. Ancient sacred texts and mythologies teach us this principle through allegories and metaphors. The characters, and their stories, indeed, represent the different organs and processes of our human body. In the same way, the world itself is in the image of our human body. For example, Atlas, of Greek mythology, was condemned to support the heavens. In reality, the skies here represent the human brain, Atlas being the skeleton. The first cervical vertebra, connecting your skull to your spine, has aptly been named Atlas. Jesus and Mary are representations of an organ in our brain, called the brainstem, the pineal gland at the top, surrounded by a highly developed specific neural network, forming a crown. It is the crown or aura of Jesus and Mary, allowing the expression of consciousness, through the pineal gland as a receiving antenna of the divine matrix. Horus, of Egyptian mythology, represents the limbic system, with the pituitary gland and the pineal gland on each side of the eye of Horus. Similar to the representation of Jesus, and according to the different religions, other deities, like Osiris or Ganesh, represent in different ways the parts of our brain, the brain being the heavens. Hence these deities depicted in the sky. Likewise, our large-scale world is also in our image. Each of our organs or structures of our body is represented in two dimensions by different countries, groups of countries, or regions of the world. Europe represents the brain, with its different organs and glands, as well as the different parts of the head, such as the tongue, the teeth, the olfactory bulb, or the lacrimal gland. The brain stem is made up of the feet of Jesus, that is to say, Italy, which looks like a boot, from which Christianity was born, and continues to his chest, which is Germany, and its power, up to the summit where the pineal gland is located, which is Luxembourg. As its name suggests, it is the city of luxury, the diamond. Lux is also a unit of light. This is explained because the pineal gland contains zirconium in its center, a natural diamond resulting from the compression of carbon. Carbon having 6 neutrons, 6 protons and 6 electrons, hence the number 666, so often associated with Satan but actually intrinsic to humans. It also represents the head of Jesus and his crown, the neural network that surrounds him. Scandinavia, including Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, represent the hypothalamus and the two hemispheres of the thalamus. Oxytocin, the love, compassion, and bonding hormone, originates in the hypothalamus and is necessary for maternal behavior, linking attachment behaviors, and pleasure pathways. This hormone is represented by Lorraine Baines in the movie Back to the Future. Remember, also, the Danish Prime Minister, who burst into tears out of compassion and remorse, because of the slaughter of minks, that she herself had organized during the pandemic. Because what must be understood here is that each event of this type is only theater, in line with what they symbolically represent. Finland, with its many lakes, represents the lacrimal gland. Remember the Finnish Prime Minister? In tears during her apology, on her video revealing her partying. Once again, we are in the presence here of a theatrical act, corroborating the link between a personality, an event in a given region, and the physiological processes of the human body, and the symptoms concerned. Indeed, alcohol consumption is an important risk factor for dry eye syndrome, which is a disease caused by decreased tear production or abnormally rapid evaporation of the tear film. The Iberian Peninsula, with its linguistic specificity of the pinching of the tongue, therefore represents the tongue. The word Iberia comes from the Celtic people, who came to settle in the peninsula. The Celts are from Ireland, formerly called Hibernia. Ireland represents the amygdala complex, an extension of the hippocampus. Remember the daughter of Alec Baldwin? Actor of Irish origin, named Ireland Baldwin, who suffers from anxiety and fear disorders. Indeed, and for good reason, the amygdala gland is the core of a neural system for processing stimuli of fear, anxiety, and spontaneous survival reactions. Also, some neurons of the amygdala are connected to pontomedullary neurons, generating the signals for the movements of the oropharyngeal muscles, including the tongue. Here we understand the direct link between the amygdala complex and language, resulting in the link between Ireland and the Iberian Peninsula. It is therefore for this reason that anxiety or fear can generate swelling of the tongue, or cause a lack of saliva in the mouth, or problems eating, swallowing, or speaking. Belgium and Holland, with its largest port in Europe, allowing the import and export of a large quantity of goods, and its many rivers, represent the olfactory bulb at the top of the nasal cavities which allows the import and export of oxygen and CO2. Remember Han Solo in Star Wars, whose first name is Dutch, and En Solo meaning smell in African language. Or Vic is van der Merwe in the movie District 9, of Dutch origin, and who is infected by the extraterrestrial substance through his nose. Austria represents the substantia nigra, a critical brain region for dopamine production, known to influence the release of human growth hormone. Remember Arnold Schwarzenegger, originally from Austria, whose name means exactly black substance, or substantia nigra, due to its specific color. Growth hormone, in effect, allowing muscle development. France represents the anterior pituitary gland, spreading its lights throughout the world, that is to say, the 10 essential hormones delivered by the pituitary gland. Remember Louis XIV, nicknamed the Sun King, and the Age of Enlightenment. Macron in turn, in his theatrical role, symbolically shows us all the neuropsychiatric symptoms of hypopituitarism or Sheehan syndrome. The United Kingdom represents the hippocampus, the center of cognition and memory. Remember Professor X, Charles Xavier, leader of the X-Men, with his hippocampus-like helmet, allowing him telepathy. Xavier means brilliant, intelligent. Having now understood this fundamental principle of analogy between our world, events, and our body, we can then return to Saturn and its cube, to better identify what it is really about. In the Bible, the temple represents our body itself. The brain is the most sacred part, the Holy of Holies. The cube, therefore, refers to the limbic system, with the pituitary gland in front, therefore France, represented by the Ark and its 10 commandments, the 10 hormones and targeted organs. And Germany, behind, with the pineal gland at its top, Luxembourg, secreting a unique hormone, melatonin. Finally, the hippocampus, therefore the United Kingdom, which surrounds these 2 glands forming the cube located in the center of Saturn. The name Abraham can be broken down into firstly, Ab, meaning center or heart, and also referring to hapax legomenon, designating the uniqueness of the word, or the association of a concept or object with a word, therefore the very definition of language. Secondly, Ra is the sun god, the day, either the pituitary gland or France. And finally, Ham means black as the night, the moon, and therefore the pineal gland and Germany. Abraham is therefore Saturn, the limbic system, particularly the hippocampus, and therefore the United Kingdom. Queen Elizabeth is a direct descendant of Abraham. The heavens, therefore, represent our brain, thus, including the sun, the pituitary gland or France, often referred to as the hexagon, which is the projection of the cube to which it belongs, and the moon, the pineal gland or Germany. Each planet, being a partial representation of our brain, paradoxically does not support any life. Each planet is in fact associated with a particular element that is harmful to the part of the brain that it represents. For example, Saturn is associated with lead, which is very harmful for the limbic system and which causes lead poisoning, also called satanism. Or, Mars is associated with iron, very toxic for the substantia nigra. Remember that Schwarzenegger traveled to Mars to recover his memory in the movie Total Recall. The cube is associated with the number 777, since the sum of the opposite faces of a cube gives 7, with 3 pairs of opposing faces. Also, remember the number 96, which corresponds to 96% of hydrogen on Saturn, and its rings, actually forming a spiral identical to the shape of a seahorse. However, Queen Elizabeth, Queen of the United Kingdom, and therefore by analogy to the limbic system, the hippocampus, surrounding the pineal and the pituitary forming the cube in the center, is thus the representation of Saturn. The Queen died at the age of 96. Charles, son of Elizabeth, is now King of the United Kingdom. Note that Charles has 7 letters, and he is called Charles III. So we find the numbers 7 and 3, the 3 sevens or 7, 7, 7. Charles becomes king at 73. Another remarkable fact is the number 47. The numbers of the Fibonacci sequence can be factorized by the prime numbers. The prime number 47 appears for the first time in the 16th Fibonacci number. There is a special connection between the position of the Fibonacci numbers and their factors. Indeed, the atom whose atomic number is 16 is sulfur. But sulfur in its biological form is essential to the proper functioning of the pineal gland and its decalcification. What we can notice here in the Monster Inc. cartoon, with Sanderson and his cone on his forehead, causing the incident after exactly 47 days. Queen Elizabeth died on September 8, 2022, 47 days from October 25, 2022, the date on which there is an eclipse, and therefore the alignment of the moon and the sun, forming the cube. It has been revealed that Charles III is a direct descendant of Vlad the Impaler of Romania, also called Dracula, who has a habit of turning into a bat. This link between Charles III and Romania is due to the direct link between the hippocampus and the part of the brain called the cerebellum. Indeed, cerebellar neurons responding to acoustic stimuli have been reported in echolocating bats. In particular, the cerebellum must integrate acoustic directional information for good flight orientation. This information is then transformed into a neural code for the space in the hippocampus. Neural activity in the hippocampus supports spatial memory and navigation. Romania, therefore, represents the cerebellum. We will also note the reason why Charles III has ears just like bats, very prominent.